After creating the base of the mug, I'm now ready to create the handle. I'm going to make sure I'm starting looking at my mug directly on the front view. On the front plane, I want to go ahead and start a sketch. Now the first thing I'm going to do is take a line, and I'm going to start on what's called the perceived edge, but not at the midpoint. I'm going to just be on the edge. So make sure I get that little T-shaped yellow relation. I'm going to start, and I'm going to draw at an upward angle, not exactly straight up. Once I do that, I'm going to throw a few dimensions on it. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go from the top edge, again a perceived edge, down to here, and set that at 1 inch. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go from point to point horizontally and set that at 0.125. And I'm going to go on the line's length exactly like that and set it at 0.5. That should fully define that line. I'm now going to move back and draw a couple more straight lines and set them in place. I'm then again going to start with the line tool, this time more towards the bottom, again on the perceived edge, not at the midpoint. So below that midpoint, I'm going to click and draw an angled line. I don't know why that line jumped way down there, so we're going to try that again. So from here to here, and then again not straight up in the air, not any relationship being added, just draws the shape like this. Now I'm going to go ahead and dimension the location of this one. So from Smart Dimension, I need to go from this point down to the bottom edge. That measurement is supposed to be set at 0.75. So it should go up a little bit. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a tangent arc again. So starting with my tangent arc, tangent with this line, I'm going to click up and go up and around and click that line over there. Then go back to just my regular selection menu. I am going to have to add a few things so that I can get everything positioned the way I want it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click the circle or the arc. I'm going to hold Control and click the line right here. I want those two parts. This automatically allows me to add a tangent relationship, which is what I want. I want the tangent relation on both ends of this arc. If I don't have that, my handle profile will be incorrect. So I'm going to check mark that green before I do any of the dimensioning. The next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and grab Smart Dimension, and I'm going to dimension this arc here. The radius for the arc is supposed to be 0.375. Should bring it in a lot tighter than I originally had it. One of the other things I need to do is I'm going to actually add a sketch fillet. It's kind of cool, as you can see, I can move some of these points around and it's maintaining my relationship. So I'm going to just change this a little bit so it a little bit more matches the drawing that some of you have seen on the paper directions. So I want to round that corner right there with a 2-inch radius. So I'm going to get my sketch fillet tool. I'm going to set the fillet parameters to have a 2-inch radius by just typing 2 and then enter. And if I click right on that dot, it's going to show me a preview, and then I can accept it, and it's going to round that for me. The order of these steps is important. So if you're wanting to just skip ahead and do your own thing, I'm going to suggest against it. The last thing I want to do is I need to use my Smart Dimension tool and define the lengths of these two lines. This top line right here, and make sure we try to keep this as an aligned dimension. You may have to pull down so that it's staying aligned. this line should be a 0.75. And this line here, again staying aligned, should be 1 inch. And that should give you a fully defined line profile. It's very important that this happens first, because on our next step, we're actually going to create a plane based on those lines. So it's really important that those are done correctly. I'm going to exit my sketch. So I'm going to angle this a little bit to make it easier to create my plane. Under Features, I'm going to go down to Reference Geometry and create a plane. This allows me to create a two-dimensional surface to draw something where I don't currently have a surface. So my first reference is going to be this endpoint of my curve, because I want it to touch my curve. In order to use the sweep tool that you're going to see in a minute, I have to have the path, which was what I just drew, touching the profile, which is what I'm about to draw. And I want that to have a coincident relationship. It picked the correct one. Now for my second reference, I want to click the line. It's going to give that a perpendicular reference and tell me that my plane is fully defined. That's exactly what I want. I want a surface that's 90 degrees from that line I started with, so I can draw a shape to create material following this path. So I'm going to go ahead and accept that. On plane 1 is where I'm going to start my sketch. So I'm going to go ahead and click Sketch there. And I'm going to also go ahead and click Normal 2. So it'll put me like this. This isn't quite the way the directions show it, but you can rotate it around differently if you choose. On here, I'm going to use the Ellipse tool. The ellipse sketches a very defined type of oval. So I'm going to put the ellipse, its center, on the apparent little origin here. So I'm going to go ahead and pivot it a little bit to make sure I'm on the origin point. I'm going to come straight down vertically a distance, and I'm going to come straight out horizontally some distance. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually grab a center line and draw a center line from there to there. And I want to make sure that if it didn't already, that line has a vertical relationship to it. My next step is to do some dimensioning. I can actually use the line itself to dimension the width here. On my directions, it says that should be at 0.5. I then want to dimension from this little star point to this little star point. And my directions say that this should be 0.175, which I was relatively close to, and I should now have a fully defined profile. I'm going to go ahead and exit that sketch. Now the sweep, the tool we're about to learn that we haven't used before, is an interesting tool where we actually need two sketches to make it work. We need one profile, which is a closed-in shape, and we need a path. And it's going to create this shape along this path. So when I click Sweep Boss Space, the first thing it's going to ask me for is the profile. Now you can try to click it on the drawing, or you can drop down the little parts tree here and pick what for me is called Sketch 4. It's then looking for the path, which again, I can either click on the path itself, or I can click what I have as Sketch 3. I should see then the little lemon jello preview of my handle. Again, creating the material along the path. I'm going to go ahead and accept that, which will create my handle. Now you'll notice that unlike a regular coffee mug, my handle ends very abruptly. Most of the time, again, with these being ceramic, you would blend that into the mug, so it would be in a much nicer looking fashion. So we're going to have SolidWorks do that also. When I click the bottom here, I can now start a sketch. I'm going to then go ahead and click Convert Entities. What that does is my sketch now basically traced the border of that surface, which is exactly what I want. I can now exit the sketch. The This is a relatively simple process. Now with Sketch 5 highlighted, I'm going to hit Extrude, and it's going to want to create material in a direction. While that's great, what I really want to do is I want this to not go blindly, but I want it to go up to a surface. So I'm going to click up to surface, and the surface I want it to go to is this rounded surface here. And it's going to highlight in pink, and it's going to give me this fingernail type extrusion, which I'm going to accept because that's exactly what I want. I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom of the mug. I'm going to click the handle surface, start a sketch, convert the entities, exit the sketch, go to Features, Extrude Boss Base with it highlighted, switch Blind to up to surface, and pick the surface that I want it to blend with. Again, getting this little wedge-like shape that fills in the gap. Once I accept that, I have completed my handle. At this point, I have a completed mug. I can go on to Schoology, add specific types of materials, whatever that might be, and find my mass and complete my quiz. Once I've done that, I can also move on to the next video, which will show me how to find a picture and how to do the appearance so that the mug looks like colored ceramic with some sort of image or decal on it. That you will create a picture of and turn in for part 2 of the coffee mug.